back. WNST, Taos, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. Lots of things going on. We do have sports back on the landscape after going on the better part of 5 months with just a little golf on the weekends and the occasional wrestling match. Baseball back. The Orioles headed to Fenway Park this weekend. This guy has been covering baseball since I was a little boy. I don't mean to embarrass him. It just shows all the wisdom he has, and he has been sharing his wisdom out on Twitter at Boomski. And, of course, at Sportico, new site he's at, longtime baseball writer, Major League Baseball insider and historian. Welcome Barry Bloom back onto the program from the Fighting Corner of Sportico. Barry, you were one of the first guys out saying maybe this isn't a great idea for Major League Baseball at this point to do this, right?
I still don't think it's a great idea, but I think we're going to play, and we'll just see how it plays itself out at this point.
Well, I go back to Rudy Gobert, right? And I go back to like when everything shut down and where we were with this virus and trying to discover things, and we shut the whole society down. 6 months later, it's raging out of control everywhere, including in Phoenix where you are, including Texas, Florida, Georgia, places they're going to be playing baseball. Here in Baltimore, it's gotten worse, and in Maryland, it's gotten worse over the weekend as well. And the rules we had 6 months ago about how safe we were going to be versus what we're going to do to stimulate our economy as well as our entertainment value and television dollars and all of those things. I really do wonder what all of the sports are doing right now. And we could talk baseball and football. I think baseball may be able to get away with this on a 60-day short track and only have positive test here and again. There may be some integrity, as much integrity as you can have in a 60-game schedule for baseball. I'm even more concerned for football, where they're going to try to drag this out over 6 months. I don't think either one's a particularly good idea. For the baseball side, I'm trying to figure out what they're trying to accomplish other than just making some money, because it really feels like a pretty ill-conceived idea, and I'm not sure that people really want to sit around all night and watch baseball for no one. I did it over the weekend. It wasn't very appealing.
Well, I watched some of the games. I watched, Yankees, Mets from New York. I watched Dodgers and Diamondbacks from L.A. Obviously, it's strange to watch games with nobody in the stands and kind of a soundtrack, but it's still baseball, and really at this point, if it's going to keep some people at home and out of bars and off the street, I think it's a great idea, because it just gives some people something to do, and you have a whole day, especially if you have packages. If you have the MLB TV package, you've got a slate of games all day long to watch, starting in the afternoon, going through the evening if you're in the East Coast. So I think people will watch. I think the ratings will be good. I think obviously it's going to bump up against the NBA and NHL at this point, because they're all playing in bubbles. I mean, I go back to one of the things I wrote back in March, in April, where if they had gotten started in the middle of May in Arizona and Florida before this blew out of proportion in both states, rather than spend a month bickering around with health and safety issues and how players were going to get paid, you would have been a couple of months into the season now, with the ability to make some adjustments and maybe go from the spring training sites into the home parks. And you would have had a much longer representative season. Plus, you would have had baseball all alone for a good period of time. I just think this was ill-conceived, because I don't think both sides really wanted to do it for a long time.
Well, and then there's just the long-term ramifications of who won. I mean, the players kind of got it stuck at them by the owners. I mean, the owners sort of pulled the card they had. Some of the players have said they're not going to play, and certainly if you saw Freeman's pleading in his case about how sick he was with the Braves, and Nick Markakis saying he doesn't want to play. The integrity of all of it to say we're going to have a champion after 60 games, and whether they're going to get to the end of it, and that remains to be seen as well. The notion that they went and fought, for in front of everyone for a month or a month and a half, I don't know that did any real good long-term help to the game or where the relationship was. And then, of course, the minor leagues being completely gutted through all this process as well, which was what the owners were looking to do before COVID ever came, right?
Well, but they were still going to have a minor league season this year with their complete, group of teams. So the whole 142 teams were going to play this year, regardless of what they wanted to do to contract for the future. And I think basically, as you see, with the precautions that are being taken in all places, and the fact that Canada with just under 9,000 deaths will not allow players to go back and forth across the border without quarantining, that we're in a situation here where it's very dangerous playing in a lot of the places where Major League Baseball is playing, especially traveling in and out of those places. I mean, California, Texas, Florida, Atlanta, Baltimore now, as you said, everything's starting to spike. New York will probably have an uptick too as more and more people are out. It's it's a dire situation. And to me, who wins, who loses, who's crowned the champion, it's always going to be an odd season to talk about and write about, and I'm sure there'll be sociological and anthropological studies about it. That this will be part of major books about the whole era, major books about how baseball acted in this whole era. To me, that who wins and loses is the smallest part of it.
Well, that's the part I can't get my arms around. I mean, they talk about who's going to be the best team. I don't know that it matters. Certainly, it's not us in Baltimore,
No, it doesn't matter because, the first shoe to drop is going to be in a 60-game season. You're going to have teams that are going to go out and can't compete for whatever reason it is, and they're going to be 5-15 or 10-20 before the season is when the season is half over. And then you're going to have a situation is, if I'm a veteran player playing on those teams, if I make a commitment to play the last 30 games and play it out, even though you're going home, or you just go home and opt out right in the middle of the season, and they just keep playing waves, bringing up waves of minor leaguers until all you have in some cities are minor leaguers on the field because the major leaguers have all gone home. I mean, it's going to be an interesting dynamic to watch, and this is where the idea of an expanded playoffs, which was floated, in all the negotiations, really was significant because it would have kept a lot more teams in the mix. If you have 16 teams in the mix rather than 10, it keeps more than half the league in the mix. Now, you're basically at the point where if you have 15 teams in the mix or 16 teams in the mix, the playoff spots with 30 games to go, it's going to be good. But you're going to have teams, I think, watching the Yankees especially and the Dodgers, they're so deep that they're going to be able to withstand injuries, COVID situations, and they're going to be able to bring up the next wave of players is still pretty good, as the Yankees proved over 162-game season with all the injuries they had last year, winning well over 100 games and going to the last game of the ALCS before they were eliminated by Houston. I mean, it plays to a team that has a lot of depth. And the teams that are frail, like the Orioles, like the Giants, they are really going to be up against it this season.
Barry Bloom is our guest. He is Boomski out on Twitter. And, of course, at Sportico, new site. I'll be telling you about that. I think the last time you and I got together, we were lamenting those damn cheating Astros, beating on trash cans and Altuve wearing a wire and all that. It's fascinating how quickly that went away, right? I mean, we spent 3-4 months on that in the offseason and how that was going to play out. That whole drama has subsided to some degree, and they're just going to come back and play baseball like that never happened, right?
Right. And now with the new schedule, you have the Dodgers actually playing the Astros, which wasn't scheduled for this year. So the Astros are going to wind up, playing the A's and playing the Dodgers, they won't wind up against the Yankees, but those games should be pretty interesting. But with all the new rules and everything about confrontations and what you can do and what you can't do, be interesting to see how the players react to all that too.
Yeah, I would say. Tell me about Sportico. I mean, it's a new thing. I know you've been a lot of places writing about baseball. Sportico's sort of the new kid on the block, right?
Right. Well, I haven't been to that many places. I mean, this is really only my third full-time job. You know, my gig with Forbes was a contractual gig, but, you know, this is actually my fourth full-time job because I started at the Union Tribune, as you know, in San Diego. Then I worked at Bloomberg for 4 years, and then I went to MLB for 16. So this is only my fourth. But yeah, Sportico is a new sports business platform under the umbrella of Penske Media Company, which has 22 different publications, and this is their first foray into sports of any kind. They put a lot of effort into it, a lot of money into it. We've got a great-looking site. I mean, Scott Soshnick, who's the editor who brought me in, and an old friend of mine from Bloomberg from way back, he assembled a terrific staff. I mean, a lot of good young writers with contacts. And, you know, we've been breaking things all over the place. In the first 3 weeks, the site has been up. I think it's very exciting, and it's a great place for me to cap off my career because, you know, I would probably say, you know, this is the way I'll go out. I'm 68 years old, and I'm very happy to be in there helping a good friend of mine and a great company get off the ground.
Well, I'll tell you what, first things first, all those years in San Diego, are you a fan of the brown and mustard? Is that the look that they've sort of brought back from the Tony Gwynn era? Is that the natural habitat of a Padres jersey in your mind?
No, I hate that uniform. And, you know, I remember when I was on the beat in 1984, you know, one of my favorite quotes of all time was, you know, I did a piece about the uniforms, which they were in the process of transitioning out of. Nobody liked those uniforms. They looked like softball uniforms. And Kurt Bavacqua called them, he said, we look like 8 pieces of manure on a cow pasture dressed in these uniforms. You know, I like my favorite of the Padre uniforms, which has changed over and over again, just like the franchise itself. It has no continuity. But my favorite were the Garvey helped design brown pinstripe uniforms, brown and with the gold and yellow emblem, and Padres across the front, San Diego Grays on the road with pinstripes. I thought that they were the most handsome uniforms they had. And then when John Moores bought the team in '95, he changed the colors over to blue and went to a blue pinstripe, which wasn't bad. But I do think the Padre colors are brown. That's the basis of it. It's just I don't think that the old softball uniforms are a great look. As I say to my younger fans, Twitter nemesis who are in the Padre world on Twitter, it's not what you wear, it's what you put into the uniform.
Well, there's no doubt about that. We both had shared a love of Tony Gwynn and that era and all that. Did they not wear those uniforms, the color scheme? Was that not brought on by Ray Kroc and McDonald's? Seems to me during that period of time the McDonald's employees wore the same colors, that's why they wore them. I've always believed that, but I don't know if that's true.
I don't think so. I think that, you know, if you go back and go to 1969 and look at the original uniform, the brown and yellow has always been a part of the uniform in some way or another. They might have evolved into especially the brown uniforms that they played in on the road during that era during Croc's ownership. But the Padre original colors were always brown and gold.
Well, and as they should be, and they're back, and maybe the Padres are a little better. Maybe they can't catch the Dodgers. But to your point, on a short track, and look, we're in Baltimore, And the only way they were going to not lose 100 games this year was to, have a pandemic and play 60. They're going to lose their share. They're not going to win. But what if they start the season 5-1, right? I mean, all of a sudden, if that were to happen, you played 10% of the schedule and you're in first place. I mean, somebody's going to do that next week. So every year somebody does that in April. And I think it's even crazier in this short track, trying to consider how unprepared the pitching is this week to go more than 2 or 3 or 4 innings, how many pitchers they're going to have to use, and especially with the new rules where you don't just come in and throw 7 pitches and go out anymore, but what that's going to mean for the teams that spent all their money on the front line pitching and now won't have Scherzer and Strasburg out on the front of the rotation 6-7 innings a night. Certainly on the short track here, that may be the case in September, may be the case if they're a playoff team and all things go well, but over the course of the first month, it is a great sort of level playing field that the guys that get paid $30 million a year to pitch will not be out on the mound on the 4th or 5th inning, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, again, if a team goes out 15-5 or 20, 25-5, 20-10, to start the first month of the season, which, as you say, there's plenty of teams over the course of time that you would never expect them to do that, and then the 162-game season has a way of leveling it out. You get to Memorial Day, the All-Star break, Labor Day, it all changes. And teams that really didn't expect to go, 2010 Padres, a good example of that. That's their last 500 team, and they had a tremendous first half of the season. Then they lost something like 7 games in a row at the end of August, early September. The Giants caught them. It was nip and tuck for the rest of the year until the Giants eliminated them on the last day of the season. But nobody expected the Padres to be there at that point. I just think that, to your point, you're going to have most teams are going to be playing piggyback starters at this point with 3 innings, and then go into the bullpen. Or you're going to have, I think in the case of Scherzer and Cole and Strasburg, the studs are going to go out and pitch 5 or 6 innings, and then you get to the bullpen. But I think generally, once you get to the back end of the rotation, it's going to be a lot of mixing and matching and bullpen games and, the first inning starters giving way to the bullpen, and then a secondary pitcher maybe going 4 or 5 innings. There's going to be a lot of combination of all those things. And plus, as you say, the 3-batter rule adds a ton of unintended consequences to the way you're setting up a pitching staff. And really, for the long run, if they do adopt that rule for the long term, how you set up a roster with a 26-man roster. And right now you have 30 guys to start the season. It goes down to 28 in a couple of weeks and then eventually to 26. And then you have people coming out of, the rest of the 60-team roster that you have, some of them in the secondary camps, and you're going to have those to replace people who are on the main roster. And then it's going to get tricky with what you do to replace people on the 40-man roster. Plus, the fact is that with a 10 or 15-day disabled list, and I think it's all 15 this year, that's a quarter of the season. So if you get an injury that's serious enough for you to sit out for 15 days, you're losing 2 weeks of the season. And that's a major part of the season. So everything is going to be different this year, and we're really not going to be able to really even analyze it. Also, analytics, which is something I'm writing about, and I've talked to a bunch of people about how do you use analytics in a short sample size of 60 games as opposed to 162. And most people who are very analytically driven in this game say you're not. You're going to have to go more by gut check and your feelings, and basically the better managers who know what they're doing are going to have an advantage when it comes to this. So again, we're getting into the nitty and gritty of, what's going to happen baseball wise, when the most important thing to me is I think if teams get through the season, no matter whether they win or lose, it's a major accomplishment if they can get through the 60-game season.
Barry, last thing for you. I mean, we talk about these minor league players shuttling up and where they are. I had Pedro Gomez on about 2 weeks ago, and his boy would be one of those people, right? That would be, somebody gets COVID, injuries, this, that, gets a call up. All of these players on hold, but for the business of baseball and what you cover at Sportico and this notion that 40 years ago you're covering baseball and you'd say how many billions of dollars would be in this industry, and you say, well, yeah, there's billions of dollars in the industry, but Manny Machado and Mike Trout are going to get all of it, and they're going to shut down Peoria. A couple weeks ago, my wife and I drove down to North Carolina, Barry, and you're an East Coaster by birth anyway. We drove through Bowie. We drove through Norfolk. We drove back through Salisbury. So on one trip, I wound up going through 3 of the Orioles minor league affiliate towns that I have to think next year, 5 years from now, won't be anymore. And where these players are going to come from and how sort of penny wise and dollar foolish it might be to sort of scuttle the minors as we know it. But this is a very, very sticky time, not just in big league cities in Oakland and Tampa and Baltimore and places where the franchises are ailing right now for money or population or television revenue or any of those things. But it's more about the basis of baseball being played in a couple of hundred places all over the country where pipeline players come through and kids play baseball and run the bases and milk the cows and do all of that stuff. I would think this is a Rob Manfred and this group of ownership. This is a pretty important time for where they're going to find their baseball players 5, 8, 10 years and into the future if they're going to just destroy minor league baseball the way they seem dead set on doing.
Well, first of all, even their most audacious plan was to contract 42 affiliated major league minor league teams. So that would leave you with over 100. It's not like you're decimating the minor leagues. Number 2, they're talking about replacing those with more independent leagues in those areas, especially in cities, smaller cities where they have facilities that really do need to be upgraded anyway. And third of all, I think the most important thing about what you're talking about, Nestor, is that this holds up development of players from the Little League all the way on up for a whole year. And I've asked this question to some major league people. What do you do to replace this if you don't have the Arizona Fall League come October? If you don't have better ball down in some of these Latin countries this year, on top of the fact that you haven't had a high school season, a college season, you haven't had a minor league season, and you don't know when it's going to come back. I mean, playing guys in a secondary facility against each other, just keep them in shape just in case you have to bring them up to the major leagues this year, is no development replacement. So it's just like mirrors a society. It's not just what's happening in baseball. You can't separate it from what's going on in society. You're going to have a lack of development of kids coming up to all levels, at all levels of school this year, who are going to have either worked virtually or not at all from elementary school up to college. And they're going to have missed significant learning time and class time at foremost times of development in their lives. So those are the things that you really have to look at behind the scenes of all this, because when you do get up and running again next year, if you can even get up and running next year, there's no guarantee that this disease is going to be abated by next February when all this is going to get going again. And so you're in a situation here where the money, the development, the playing of the game in so many different cities is going to be put in a situation where it's just on hold with the rest of a lot of things that are going on in society.
Well, I hope you stay safe out there. I mean, it's been hot here this week. You're out in Phoenix where it's really, really hot. They're going to play some baseball here this week. We're going to watch it on the television and turn the sound up, see if they'll pump in some crowd sound. Congrats on the gig with Sportico, and I know of your commitment to that. I've been following along. I've been following you, and you were cranky and angry they were going to play. I just hope once they start this thing, they don't have to stop it, right? Like, that's how I feel about football. Like, I think it's ambitious, and I admire parts of it, but other parts of it, I say, how entertained do we need to be during a pandemic? You know, I did love the point that you brought up, though, Barry, saying if it keeps people to stay at home, then it's a good thing. And I would agree with that. But I hope you stay safe out there. You doing all right?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Family's doing great. We've got kids and grandkids in LA, kids and grandkids in Brooklyn. My wife and I have been together every day. So it's been really, I'm blessed considering what a lot of other people are going through.
Imagine your wife, she's subjected to you and baseball later on in the week, so then you'll have something to talk about. Barry, take care of yourself. It's great having you on, bud.
Okay, thanks, Nestor.
Barry Bloom, Boom Ski, out on Twitter and always out at Sportico.com. Has been covering baseball forever out on the West Coast. You get a great picture up there with Tony Gwynn in the dugout. It looks like the dugout. Man, it looks like San Diego's dugout. It looks like the Murph back in the day. Might have been a new one, though. I'm not sure. Find him at Boomski, Boomski. That's Barry Bloom, longtime baseball insider. Been voting in the Hall of Fame since 1992, so that's all. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat. Not at Camden Yards, but out on the internet when they are at Camden Yards, along with Luke Jones, who is Baltimore Luke. We are putting the band back together, covering WNST sports, Ravens, Orioles, keeping calm, staying local, and always Baltimore positive.